Hello, my friends. So this is going to be the story of the last arc of my Portland campaign. A lot of what happened in this final arc was based on the TV show called The Strain.
Oh my God.
What the hell are those?
Something new.
This is it. You must contain it.
Strain is a vampire show, ostensibly, although really it's more of a zombie show. It's an interesting show by Guillermo del Toro. Like, he pretty much just took that exact same idea from Blade 2 and made a TV show out of it. Pretty decent show, had a very good first season, and then for the rest of it, you know, it had a very good first season. And if you're not familiar with The Strain, basically, the version of vampires that exist in The Strain are that there is this master vampire who is called the Master. They are like these immortal worm creatures that are made out of like a bunch of little wiggly worms. And then they infect a bunch of lesser vampires who are effectively zombies, right? I mean, they're vampires, but they're zombies. And they are all just kind of like thralls to the big daddy vampire. Unlike most vampires that you encounter in most fiction, they have like tongue tentacle mouths is the only way I can describe it. Like their tongues unfurl like a fucking lamprey. And they had encountered these things a couple of times in the game. They had run into these weird creatures that were these strigoi, which is a Romanian, I think, word for vampire, and that's what they're called in the show. But they didn't know what they were. They met them, I think, 2 different times. And in both cases, they were like, what are these weird-ass fucking monsters? And they killed the ones that they found. So they're just kind of like, that's bizarre. But it wasn't until very late in the story that they figured out what was going on when Dimple showed up. So when the player character Gideon died, the player picked a new character, a Banu Hakim named Dimple. Since I already had like this idea for this Strigoi storyline, it made sense to insert the Banu Hakim regarding that, since that's exactly the kind of thing that you would expect them to be hunting down, right? The prince gives her permission. Well, the prince doesn't do anything because the prince is basically in a coma. He's effectively in torpor. But the Primogen give her permission to investigate. They're like, the prince says you can investigate. Now, the first thing that they decide to do is they decide to go check out the shithouse, because that was one of the locations where they had found these things a few weeks earlier. They had been looking for some disappeared people out in the woods, and I can't remember exactly how they ran into these things, but they found a group of strigoi living in the bowels of like a big outhouse. So there's like a concrete shit house that just has like some outhouses that go down into a big pit of poo water out at the campgrounds. And there were like 4 or 5 of the strigoi down in there, just living in there, hanging out in the poo water. They had killed these guys, but like I said, they didn't know what they were. So they tell Dimple, when Dimple describes them, she's like, they look like kind of Nosferatu a little bit. They're sort of semi-ghouled creatures. They're kind of like halfway between a ghoul and a vampire. They have these tongues that like this big snake lamprey thing that comes out and bites. The players are like, oh, yeah, we did run into some of those guys at this shithouse. So they take her out there to go look. And so they track down the, what do you call it? Sanitation septic company that empties this shithouse. They follow to the like processing plant where that company dumps off their septic waste. They go break in there and they find that there are a bunch of these things hiding out in these giant shit tanks at this poop processing plant. I'm sure there are technical terms for these things. I don't know what they are. I'm not in the poop business. But whatever the technical term for poop processing plant is, they're at that plant.
Look! Did you see that? What?
Now, I mentioned in the last video that poor little Jake died because of a grenade. when he was mind controlled by the master and forced to blow himself up. And I said, I don't remember where he got a grenade. But going back through the notes, this is how they got their grenades. When they found out that all these Strigoi were hiding down there, they're like, we need explosives. And he went around trying to find like underground weapons dealers and found some dealers who were willing to sell him grenades, which they then used to kill the Strigoi in these poop tanks. Now, if you can imagine the horror of a gigantic cistern filled with thousands upon thousands of gallons of human waste. And in that cistern are a bunch of unshowered, rotting, cannibalistic zombie creatures just hanging out. Just waddling in the waste, right? And then you open up a portal into this space and throw into it a grenade, which then detonates, hurling mountains of broken flesh and just a phenomenal aerosolized spray of liquefied human shit. That would not be a very pleasant experience.
What is it?
The bog of eternal stench!
Would it be worse than holding on to one of those grenades after the fight, thinking, I'm going to save this last grenade, it'll definitely come in useful, and then getting mind controlled and ordered to blow the grenade up, killing yourself? I don't know which of those two things would be worse, but basically, nothing good came from these grenades. So, just like in The Strain, you have the master vampire, you have the human ghouls who are doing his bidding, and then you have this army of zombies acting as the shock troops for the invasion. And that's what they run into, is these humanoid ghouls who are running this septic plant where they store all these Strigoi, because I guess they just like hanging out in the poo-poo, and are feeding them all this beef, because, they may be zombies, but they still like beef. I mean, everybody does. It's tasty. And when the grenade situation is too gross and inefficient to kill the large number of Strigoi here, they get very clever about things. They track the meat packing company back to its source. They buy a shit ton of rat poison. They poison all of these like beef sides and pig carcasses. And then when the workers deliver all this food to the Strigoi, and the Strigoi swarm out of the shit cisterns like a bunch of rats and come feed off of them, they all get poisoned. And they manage to wipe out, like 40 or 50 of these things all at once. Now, at this point, they get word that there has been some horrible, weird event at the airport, and they head off to look into that. And They find the plane that has landed, bringing the master vampire here. So he has now physically arrived. And they have like a plane full of people who've all been infected and are turning into Strigoi, who they're trying to contain. And then they're also trying to chase down the coffin with the master in it. He has this giant coffin full of earth that he's sleeping in, that he has delivered himself here in, that his servants are like ferreting out. They try really hard to chase this thing down. Like they can sense, they're like, this is bad. Like a plane landed with a bunch of dead people on it, and there was a giant box. We don't like this at all. And they're running around. They're finding like murdered security guards, following blood trails, but they're unable to catch up to it ultimately. I did give them a chance to catch it, to like try and nip this in the bud, but they had to roll really well on some successive tests to like catch up to this box, and they weren't able to do it. So the box and the master vampire escape. And so then after investigating all this, they're like, we're pretty sure that these people are going to start turning into Strigoi. These bodies appear dead, but Dimple knows that they're going to reanimate. A lot of them have already been evacuated to a hospital. So they're like, we got to go to the hospital. They're like injecting them with poison to kill them so they don't turn into Strigoi. By the time they get to the hospital, a lot of them have already turned into Strigoi, and so they get into a fight with them in the hospital, and that's when Jake tries to dominate one, gets counter-dominated when the the master assumes direct control.
I am assuming direct control.
And is forced to blow himself up. They kill a lot of these Strigoi, but some of them escape and flee into the city. So there are some of them loose who are going to start repopulating, and everyone that they bite turns into another Strigoi. So this whole situation is not great, and they don't manage to capture the master vampire, but they do catch Skeletor, the Nosferatu, who they find helping to like try and unload these bodies and whisk them away. And when they see him, they're like, what the fuck is this guy doing? And so they go over and they stake him, and they take him back and they interrogate him. And this is when the big reveal occurs. Probably the best like villain reveal I've ever done in a game. Which is that they go to interrogate Skeletor, and they manage to get him to tell him with like Dominate that the remaining Nosferatu, the ones who are still around, because a bunch of them have gotten killed by the players' behaviors, have been recruited to help the master, and they are assisting in bringing all of these Strigoi into the city to fuck with the Camarilla, just to screw everything up. And they say that, you know, the guy who's leading all of this, who's organized all of this, came and recruited them and was like, haven't those player characters really fucked you over hard? And they ask him, well, who is this guy who's going around recruiting everybody working for the master? And they tell him it's Walter Bell, the Giovanni.
Everybody betrayed me. I fed up with this world.
Walter had been around in this campaign off and on a lot, and the players had interacted with him a lot. And he had always been a character who they had viewed as like this little weaselly, cowardly, pathetic Walter Bell on the run from the Giovanni, doesn't have any friends. He's afraid of everything. He just wants to be left alone. We're always dragging him into dangerous situations. Gideon had kind of adopted him almost as like her little pet Giovanni, that she was trying to buck him up and improve his self-confidence. But the entire time that they were doing that, he was like the end villain of the whole campaign. And many of the different things that they had done, like the fights that they got into with werewolves at different times, the whole situation with the glass house and the 13 ghosts, and the slow trickle of Strigoi into the city, have all been masterminded by Walter Bell as part of his plan to basically destroy the whole Camarilla setup in Portland. And they never suspected him at all.
What a twist!
The difficulty of like a twist villain is that almost always what ends up happening is either the characters immediately peg them as like, that's a bad guy, I don't trust him. Even if it's for like a ridiculous reason. Sometimes they correctly lock on to like something suspicious. Other times it's like, oh, what color shoes did you say he's wearing? No, he's a bad guy. I don't. Sometimes it's ridiculous. But so like there's no drama or twist because they didn't like this guy anyway. Or it's an NPC who they just don't give a shit about, right? They don't care. And they're like, the villain was actually Steve the whole time. And they're like, who is Steve again?
He's my nemesis, my archenemy.
I don't think Pop thinks you're his archenemy.
Come on, I'm sure the walls of the Venture compound are practically caked with the lingering curses of the Monarch's name.
No. I've never even heard him mention you.
But with Walter Bell, it worked so well because the players completely of their own volition, or specifically Gideon, completely of her own volition, adopted Walter Bell and forcibly made him like a sidekick of their party. And usually it does not work out that way. Usually the NPCs who the players decide, I'm going to make you an honorary member of the party and we're going to involve ourselves in all your business. Are NPCs that you never had any plan for. They're like, is there a guy there? And you're like, yeah. What's his name? Boblin. The Goblin. They're like, oh, Boblin the Goblin. We love Boblin the Goblin. Come with us on our adventure. You had nothing planned for them. The fact that I had this villain set up, and completely on their own, the players went and found him and brought him into their storyline, and then kept dragging him in to everything they were doing, was just so perfect. It's never happened before, and it may never happen again. But man, was it great. The only thing that would have been better is if Gideon hadn't gotten killed and was still alive to see this. And boy, did the players felt so betrayed. So betrayed. Why have you done this? What kind of sin?
What sin could a man commit in a single lifetime to bring this upon himself?
They go to confront Walter and tell him like how disappointed that they are in him. And he has his whole angry villain speech that he goes into about, you all underestimate me, but I've become prince of this city without even leaving my house. I am the best at being a Giovanni. They get into a prolonged fight with Walter, which they don't really lose exactly, but they're not able to kill him. In addition to having lots of really dangerous necromancy powers and like potence, Walter also has obtenebration, which means that he can like hit up that what do you call it, shroud or ability or whatever, which blinds most of the characters. They can't see in that shroud. He also has a bunch of strigoi that come rushing out of his closets and stuff. They get kind of overwhelmed, and the players are like, this is not going well, let's just get out of here. So they retreat. Walter flees, and then they're trying to figure out what they're going to do next. Now, over the next few nights, they are kind of playing this endless game of catch up with the strigoi as the strigoi infection gradually spreads further and further through the city. They're chasing down leads, trying to find like outbreaks and crush them. They kill a lot of strigoi. They get into a lot of combats, but the strigoi are like a virus, right? They keep biting people. They keep spreading. You start getting like chaos in the streets where like there are mobs of these people running around attacking people out in the open in the streets. There's news reports about just like riots and chaos. The city is kind of rapidly spiraling out of control, and the players are not able to contain it. And they also can't seem to find the source of it. They are reaching out to allies outside the city, trying to like bring people in as fast as they can. They meet up with the Tremere, who by this point are not actually the Tremere. They're a bunch of Zmeets who have all killed the Tremere and flesh-crafted themselves to look like the Tremere, as well as Rick/Ulrich/ now Hunter, the player character who rejoins the party again, but now with a different name and face, and pretending to be a Tremere. And they ask him a lot of questions about magic and sorcery and ancient lore and rituals he could use to help them. And he, being actually a Bruja who has no magical abilities whatsoever, he just has to fake his way through all of this stuff, kind of convincing the players like, wow, this is a pretty useless Tremere we got here on our side. But
they asked me how well I understood theoretical physics. I said I had a theoretical degree in physics. They said, welcome aboard.
They are able to find one of these ghouls, and they're able to read his mind. Ko is able to scan through his mind and find he is storing the master at this movie theater, this abandoned movie theater. And so the players head over there to go investigate and try and hopefully, I think they take some explosives with them, hopefully go blow up the master. This is where like a really bizarre thing occurred that I still do not really understand. Players and a bunch of their NPC allies show up at this theater. They find that there are like 100 or more of these strigoi who are just kind of hanging out in this theater, like just sitting there. It's like staring. They're like in a fugue state. And it way down at the center of the theater, there is this giant box, the coffin that the master was brought in, and this is sitting there. Now, what I expected the players to do was like firebomb it or something, but instead, for some reason, Ko decides, I'm going to try and walk in there and see if they attack me. And they don't. He'd be like, I'm going to go a little further in. I'm going to go down the aisle. I'd be like, are you sure? Yeah, I'm going to go further in. And he'd be like, I'm going to go right up to the box. And I'd be like, are you sure? He's like, yeah. Are the other strigoi, like, are they reacting? Like, no, they're not reacting. They all seem to be kind of asleep. It's like, okay, I'm going to open the box. It's like, are you sure? Okay. He opens the box and he finds the master, this giant gargantuan looking, like Nosferatu-y, weird ass vampire sleeping in this dirt. All right. Ko was using, what is it called? Majesty. Although as I recall, it wouldn't have made a difference one way or the other because the Strigoi were asleep. But he's using Majesty, and I think his plan was, I'm going to open the box, Majesty is up, so the vampire in there won't be able to attack me, and I'm going to stake him. And I guess that was the plan. But it doesn't work that way. He opens the box, and the master wakes up, and he goes to stake him, but he loses like initiative. So when you have Majesty, you have to roll against it to attack. It prevents people from attacking you. The master rolls high enough to break Majesty and overcome it, so he can attack first, or so he can attack, and then Ko loses initiative, so the master gets to go first. And because the Strigoi are not from Vampire the Masquerade, I restatted them out and largely copied over a skill set from the Ministry, right? The Setites. The Setites have a specific power where they can like project their tongue like a snake and bite, and that's like the main thing that these vampires do, is like the big snake tongue thing. I was like, that sounds like they're related in some way to the Setites. They're probably some like bloodline offshoot of Setites, which would also kind of fit with their general mass corruption zombie apocalypse vibe. So basically, the master is like a variant Setite, which means that among the various other Setite powers he has the power to tear people's hearts out of their chest, like the guy from Indiana Jones. I can't remember what it's called right now. Thief of Hearts, Heart of Darkness. Where's my book? Character must expend 1 willpower point. Removing the heart of a reluctant vampire is a difficult feat, comparable to staking. Victim may use fortitude to soak. Some elders can pull the heart from another vampire's chest with a quick snatch. Does not destroy the victim unless the attacker then destroys the stolen heart. It's not an easy power to use. So basically, you rip their heart out like in Indiana Jones, exactly as I said.
Still alive.
So Ko opens the coffin, and he pulls up the stake. Like, here we go. He's gonna stake him, and the master like comes out, and he's like, and he's like, and like rips Ko's heart right out of his chest. And Ko is just like, he can do that. He can do that.
I lost? Wait a minute, I'm not supposed to lose. Let me see the script.
So, the players flee now that Ko, their leader, and arguably the strongest vampire in the group, is been captured and incapacitated. They're really at a loss as to what to fucking do. And luckily, they still have their connections with the Glasswalkers, these werewolves who they worked with a while back. And they managed to meet up with these Glasswalkers because they're going around looking for allies. And the Glasswalkers are able to tell them about this guy who was going around trying to recruit them as another werewolves. And this leads them back to Walter Bell. And the Glasswalkers know that Walter Bell is holed up at the Glass House. The Glass House and the Glasswalkers are unrelated. They just both have the name Glass in them. But the Glass House is the big 13 Ghosts house that the players were messing around with way earlier in the story. And that house is still there. They never destroyed it. And it is still spooky. And this is where Walter Bell has holed up. They eventually go back and force to this theater, find that the master is gone. They figure correctly, they must have retreated to the Glass House. Like, that's the logical place to go. And we need to wake up the prince. So Constantine, the very, very old prince, who the players think is a Ventru, although he's actually a Salubri, has been catatonic since he arrived in the city. Feeding him regular blood, like he'll kind of like his servants will like bring him human blood and like kind of pour it down his throat and then rub his throat like a dog. But maybe if we give him kindred blood, he'll wake up. They're like, who could we find who is, expendable? Oh, I know. Dr. fucking Boggs. So Dimple and Layla are like, yeah, let's just go fucking kill Dr. Boggs. They go and grab him, and they drag him before Constantine. And they're just like, hey, Prince Constantine, this guy has been grinding children into paste and eating them. And we were definitely going to tell you about that as soon as we had a chance. And the prince diablerizes Dr. Boggs, which the players feel like that's a good end for him, and wakes up and immediately kind of flies into, I want to eat vampires. Where are more souls? And they're like, great, we have lots of souls for you, my prince. Many, like, bring me sinners. We have many sinners. So they load up to go to the spooky house. The players get a bunch of explosives, like Scratch built like C4, and they load up a SWAT truck that they get hold of with C4. And then they have Rafi drive it into the house and then blink out because he has blink. And in doing this, blow up the entire fucking glass house. Both a brilliant plan because this wiped out so many of the Strigoi who were like hanging out in that house, and really demolished the enemy forces who were in there. Like, they were going to rush up here. They brought a bunch of allies with them. They have all the NPCs in the city. They got Prince Constantine woken up. They got the Glasswalker werewolves with them. They called in like people from out of town who owed them boons. But still, it was going to be a massive, really hard fight. But because they demolished the place with that bomb, they killed most of the enemies they had to fight right off the bat and transformed it into a very easy fight. The unfortunate thing, though, is that Ko was in that house also because he was not dead. He was just in torpor. So when they blew up the house, while they did kill most of the bad guys and make the final battle way easier for themselves, they also killed Director Ko. Very sad. So what follows was a huge battle. One of the, I think the biggest battle of that whole campaign, probably, was where they're fighting a bunch of people. They kill a lot of Strigoi. They kill the Master. Unfortunately, though, Walter Bell escapes, which the players were very upset about, but I was delighted by because I was like, man, I'm so glad he got away. A villain like that, who the players, like, out of character, just hate so much in real life. Perfect person to bring back into the story, into some other campaign later in the future. And after the battle was finished, and all of the Strigoi died, and Portland returned to normal, the players kind of separated up and went their separate ways. Layla was now in charge of taking care of the prince, Constantine, who had fallen back into torpor, but would still need someone to wheel his little chair around and make sure that his wishes were known to the others in the city. Rick gave up on his disguises, went back to his original face, and finished the book he'd been writing on Ko. Then he left the city to continue his work, studying cults somewhere else. Dimple had completed her mission and destroyed the Master, so she returned back east to whatever new tasks the Banu Hakim might have in store for her. Emil was given the position of Sheriff of Portland, and so he decided to stick around where he could be close to the trees and the zoo and whatever weird little creature would occasionally bring him presents for body parts in the basement. And while Ko was no longer with us, as a memorial, his ghouls put on a performance of the play he had been working on for the last several weeks of the campaign, an adaptation of his favorite movie, Battlefield Earth.
While you were still learning how to spell your name, I was being trained to conquer galaxies.
And that was the end of the Portland campaign. A very messy and confusing campaign that went through a lot of player character deaths, a lot of kind of soft resets, a lot of false starts, and cohesively was not my best effort, but I think did have some very good moments, some really good individual storylines in it, and the players seem to have a lot of fun. So, all in all, I would consider it still to be a pretty decent, moderate success. So, that is the end of that tale. I guess we will now return, when I have time, to recounting what happened in Rome, and then after Rome, Boston, and then after Boston, Paris. And by the time I get to Paris, who knows what campaign we will be on. We will just have to see what the future holds. So that's all I got for you. Thank you for watching.
And that nail gun that you have there? Aside from silver nails, well, standard issue?
From Home Depot.